The day my grandfather's will was read, my brother looked straight into my eyes and told me I had inherited nothing. He did not say it with sadness. He said it with a small smile, like he had been waiting years to watch me lose. I sat quietly at the long dining table inside Grandpa's old house in Atlanta. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The room smelled like old wood, coffee, and the cinnamon candles Grandpa always burned during family gatherings. My name is Naomi Carter. I was 34 years old then, working long shifts as a registered nurse. I had spent most of my adult life caring for other people, but the person I cared for most was my grandfather, Elijah Carter. Grandpa had raised my brother Marcus and me after our mother died. I was 12 when we moved into his house. Marcus was 15. We were both hurting, but we handled our pain differently. I became quiet and careful. Marcus became angry and proud. Grandpa never treated us differently. He made breakfast every morning, checked our homework at night, and worked extra hours at his small repair shop to give us a stable home. But as we grew older, Marcus began believing he deserved more. He always talked about success, expensive cars, and owning property. I only wanted a peaceful life. I rented a small apartment near the hospital, drove an old car, and visited Grandpa every weekend. Marcus rarely came unless he needed something. Still, Grandpa loved him. Family is not always easy, Grandpa once told me while we washed dishes together, but love must remain honest. At the time, I did not understand why he said that. A few years before Grandpa died, his health began to fail. His knees grew weak, and his memory sometimes became cloudy. I started visiting almost every evening after work. I cooked his meals, organized his medicine, cleaned the house, and took him to his doctor appointments. Marcus said he was too busy. He had started a real estate business and liked telling everyone that he was building something important. Whenever I asked him to help, he gave the same answer. "You're a nurse, Naomi. You know how to handle this better than I do." I wanted to argue, but I never did. I knew Grandpa did not need tension inside his home, so I carried the responsibility quietly. Some nights, I sat beside Grandpa's bed while he slept. I listened to his breathing and watched the shadows move across the walls. Those moments were difficult, but I never thought of them as a burden. Grandpa had given me a home when I had nowhere else to go. Caring for him was not a duty. It was love. 3 weeks before he died, I found him sitting alone in the living room with an old video camera on the table. "What are you doing with that?" I asked. He placed his hand over the camera and smiled, just saving a few memories. His voice sounded tired, but there was something serious in his eyes. I offered to help him, but he shook his head. Some things a man must say alone. I did not ask another question. Grandpa died quietly on a Sunday morning. I was sitting beside him, holding his hand. His last words were simple. "Do not let money change your heart." At the funeral, Marcus cried louder than anyone. People hugged him and told him how proud Grandpa had been of him. Marcus stood near the coffin wearing an expensive black suit, receiving every kind word like it belonged only to him. I stayed near the back. My grief was too deep for public display. I could still hear Grandpa laughing in the kitchen. I could still picture him sitting on the porch, waving as I drove away after my visits. 4 days after the funeral, we gathered for the reading of the will. Marcus arrived early and sat at the head of the table. His wife, Vanessa, sat beside him. She wore a cream-colored coat and kept whispering into his ear. Our family attorney, Mr. Bennett, opened a brown folder and began reading. Grandpa left several personal items to relatives. His tools went to an old friend. His books went to the local church. A small amount of money was given to a community program. Then Mr. Bennett paused. "The main property and remaining financial assets will be addressed separately." Marcus leaned back in his chair. He looked relaxed, almost pleased. When the reading ended, he turned toward me. "Well," he said softly, "I guess Grandpa knew who could actually handle his estate." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Marcus folded his hands on the table. "The house, the savings, the repair shop property, he left them to me." My chest tightened. Mr. Bennet had not said that. But before I could speak, Marcus continued. "You didn't inherit anything, Naomi. Maybe Grandpa appreciated what you did, but appreciation is not the same as trust." Vanessa lowered her eyes, but I saw the smile she was trying to hide. I felt hurt, but not because of the money. I never cared about Grandpa's house or savings. What hurt was the way Marcus spoke, as if all those years beside Grandpa had meant nothing. I looked at Mr. Bennet. He was still holding the brown folder. His face had become very serious. "Marcus," he said, "the reading is not finished." The room fell silent. Mr. Bennet reached into his briefcase and removed a small black memory card. "There is one final instruction from Elijah Carter." Marcus's smile disappeared. Mr. Bennet placed the memory card beside the old television. "Your grandfather recorded a message 3 weeks before his death. He requested that both of you watch it together before the final part of the will was revealed." I felt the air leave my lungs. 3 weeks before his death. That was the same evening I had found Grandpa sitting beside the old camera. Mr. Bennet inserted the card and turned on the screen. For a moment, there was only darkness. Then Grandpa appeared. He was sitting in his favorite chair, wearing his blue sweater. His hands rested calmly on his knees. He looked directly into the camera. "My dear Naomi and Marcus," he began, "if you are watching this, then I am no longer with you." Beside me, Marcus stopped breathing. Grandpa leaned closer to the camera. "And before either of you learns what I truly left behind, there is a truth this family must finally hear." The room became so quiet that I could hear the rain tapping against the windows again. No one moved. No one spoke. Grandpa looked into the camera with the same calm eyes I had known all my life. "If you're watching this," he said softly, "then both of you are sitting in my living room. I hope you're listening with your hearts, not your pride." I felt tears filling my eyes. It sounded like he was speaking directly to me. Marcus folded his arms across his chest. Vanessa reached for his hand, but he pulled it away without looking at her. Grandpa smiled gently. "Money has a strange way of showing people who they really are. Some become thankful, others become greedy. That is why I didn't want my will to be read like an ordinary document." He paused for a moment before continuing. "I wanted the truth to come first." My heart beat faster. I had no idea what truth he meant. Grandpa looked down for a second, then back at the camera. "When your grandmother was alive, we promised each other that our family would always choose love over money. Sadly, I watched that promise slowly disappear." His voice remained calm. "There were days I pretended to be asleep because I wanted to hear how each of you spoke when you thought I couldn't hear." Marcus shifted in his chair. I remembered those evenings. Sometimes I would quietly close Grandpa's bedroom door after giving him his medicine. Marcus had visited only a few times during those months. Grandpa continued. "Naomi never knew I was awake. She would straighten my blanket, check my medicine, and whisper, 'Good night, Grandpa, I love you.'" A tear rolled down my cheek. I never imagined he had heard those words. Then Grandpa sighed. "Marcus, your visits were different." Marcus stared at the television without blinking. "I heard you asking about my bank accounts." The room felt colder. "I heard you asking where I kept my property papers." Marcus swallowed hard. "I even heard you tell Vanessa that waiting for an old man to die was becoming exhausting." Vanessa's face turned pale. She immediately looked toward Marcus. I never," Marcus quickly interrupted. "He's remembering it wrong." Mr. Bennet calmly raised his hand. "No interruptions." The recording continued. "I wasn't angry," Grandpa said. "I was simply heartbroken." His words were gentle. There was no bitterness in his voice, because I realized my grandson had started measuring love with dollar signs. Marcus looked down at the floor. For the first time that day, he had nothing to say. Grandpa smiled again. "Now I want to tell you something about Naomi." He leaned back in his chair. "My granddaughter never once asked about my money." I closed my eyes. Every memory came rushing back. The grocery trips, the doctor visits, the long nights beside his bed, the mornings I cleaned the house before going to work. Grandpa continued speaking. "She missed birthday parties, vacations, and holidays because she stayed here taking care of me." I wiped away another tear. I never asked her to do all that. She simply loved me. The silence inside the room became heavy. Even Vanessa looked uncomfortable. Grandpa reached into his sweater pocket. He pulled out an old silver key. "I know both of you recognize this." Marcus immediately leaned forward. It was the small key Grandpa always wore around his neck. As children, we often asked what it opened. He always laughed and answered the same way. "Something valuable." We never learned more than that. Grandpa held the key toward the camera. "This key opens a safety deposit box." Marcus's eyes widened. I noticed the excitement return to his face. He probably thought there was a fortune waiting inside. Grandpa smiled as if he could still read Marcus's thoughts. "But before anyone opens that box, there is one last thing you both need to understand." He looked directly into the camera again. "My greatest inheritance was never money. It was character. If either of you chooses wealth over family, then everything I worked for will mean nothing." He lowered the key onto the table beside him. "The contents of that safety deposit box will determine who receives the rest of my estate." Marcus suddenly stood up. "What does that mean?" he shouted. The video ended. The television screen turned black. No one moved, no one even breathed. Mr. Bennet slowly picked up an envelope that had been sitting beneath the television. Across the front, written in Grandpa's familiar handwriting, were just 6 words: "Open only after the recording ends." Mr. Bennet picked up the envelope with slow, careful hands. For a moment, no one in the room spoke. The rain outside had become heavier, and the sound filled every corner of Grandpa's old living room. Marcus finally broke the silence. "Open it," he said. "Let's stop playing games." His voice sounded impatient, but I could hear something else beneath it. Fear. Mr. Bennet looked at both of us before opening the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten letter. He unfolded it carefully. "This letter," he said, "is to be read exactly as Elijah Carter instructed." He cleared his throat and began reading. "If you are hearing these words, then my recording has already been played. Now it is time for one final test." I felt my hands tighten around each other. Grandpa always believed a person's true character appeared when they were forced to choose. "Marcus and Naomi, the key I showed you belongs to a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside that box is something very important, but neither of you will open it today." Marcus frowned. "What?" Mr. Bennet continued reading. "Instead, both of you will meet me there one last time through the instructions I have left behind." I almost smiled. That sounded exactly like Grandpa. He loved teaching lessons instead of giving easy answers. "Marcus, I want you to spend one full week helping your sister prepare my house for its future. Clean it, repair it, donate my belongings with respect. Do the work together." Marcus immediately shook his head. "This is ridiculous." Mr. Bennet ignored him. "No employees, no paid workers, only the 2 of you." Marcus let out a quiet laugh. "You've got to be kidding." I looked at my brother. For years he had avoided this house unless he wanted something. Now Grandpa was asking him to spend an entire week inside it. "If either of you refuses," the letter continued, "the safety deposit box will remain closed for 1 full year." Marcus slammed his hand onto the table. "A whole year?" His face had turned bright red. I had never seen him lose control so quickly. Mr. Bennet calmly folded the first page and picked up the second. The reason is simple. I do not want my family remembering me through money. I want you to remember me through time spent together. Those words hit me deeply. Grandpa never cared about expensive things. His happiest moments were always around the dinner table. Sunday breakfasts, backyard cookouts, Christmas mornings, simple moments. Marcus stood and began pacing across the room. "This makes no sense," he muttered. "I have meetings. I have clients. I don't have time for this." Mr. Bennet looked at him. "Those are your grandfather's instructions." Marcus turned toward me. "Naomi, tell him this is insane." I met my brother's eyes. For the first time in years, I saw panic instead of confidence. "I'll do whatever Grandpa wanted," I answered quietly. Marcus stared at me. "So you're really going to spend a week cleaning this old house?" I nodded. "This house wasn't just a building. It was our home." He rolled his eyes. "You've always been sentimental." Before I could answer, Mr. Bennet reached into another folder. "There is something else." Marcus immediately stopped walking. "What now?" Mr. Bennet placed 2 small envelopes on the table. One had my name, the other had Marcus's. "Your grandfather asked you to read these only after leaving this room." I picked mine up carefully. The paper felt familiar. Grandpa always bought the same cream-colored stationery. Marcus grabbed his envelope much more quickly. "What if mine explains everything?" he asked. Mr. Bennet smiled gently. "Perhaps, but I don't believe your grandfather wanted to explain everything. I believe he wanted both of you to discover something." We left the house a few minutes later. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle. Marcus walked ahead without saying a word. Vanessa hurried after him. I watched them get into their black SUV. Before closing the door, Marcus looked back at me. "You really think Grandpa trusted you more than me?" I didn't answer. He drove away before I had the chance. I sat inside my old sedan for several minutes before opening Grandpa's letter. His handwriting immediately brought tears to my eyes. "My sweet Naomi," it began. "If you're reading this, then I already know your heart is hurting. Please don't let bitterness take its place." I smiled through my tears. That sounded exactly like him. "There are truths your brother still doesn't know. I have carried them for many years because I hoped he would change on his own." I read those words twice. What truths? What had Grandpa been hiding? At the bottom of the page was only one final sentence. "Next Saturday, when the week is finished, everything hidden will finally be revealed." I folded the letter slowly. For the first time since Grandpa's funeral, I realized this wasn't only about an inheritance. Grandpa had been protecting a family secret, and whatever waited inside that safety deposit box was powerful enough to change everything Marcus believed about our family. The next 7 days felt unlike anything I had experienced before. Every morning, I drove to Grandpa's house just after sunrise. The old place looked the same from the outside, but inside it felt quieter than ever. His favorite chair was empty. His coffee mug still rested beside the kitchen sink. Every room carried memories that made my heart ache. To my surprise, Marcus showed up on the first morning. He walked in wearing expensive sneakers and a designer jacket, looking completely out of place. "I still think this is a waste of time," he said. I simply handed him a pair of work gloves. "We're starting with the garage." He sighed loudly but followed me. For hours, we sorted old tools, boxes of photographs, and shelves filled with Grandpa's repair equipment. Dust covered everything. The silence between us felt heavy. Late that afternoon, Marcus picked up an old hammer. "I remember this," he said quietly. "Grandpa taught me how to build a birdhouse with it." I smiled. "He taught me too." For the first time in years, we shared a memory without arguing. The following days became easier. We painted the back fence together. We repaired loose kitchen cabinets. We packed Grandpa's clothes into boxes for donation. Sometimes we laughed over old stories. Sometimes we worked without saying a single word. Little by little, the anger between us began to soften. On Friday afternoon, while cleaning Grandpa's bedroom closet, I found a small wooden box hidden beneath a blanket. "Marcus," I called. He walked over. Inside the box were dozens of old family photographs. There were pictures of our mother as a little girl. There were photos of Grandma holding Marcus as a baby. Then I found one picture that made me stop breathing. It showed Grandpa standing beside a young lawyer outside a courthouse. Between them stood a little black girl who looked almost exactly like me. Written on the back were the words, "The happiest day of my life. Naomi finally came home." I stared at the picture. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Marcus took the photograph from my hand. His face became pale. "I've never seen this before." Before either of us could say another word, a folded document slipped out from behind the picture frame. Marcus picked it up. His hands began shaking. "It says, adoption order." My heart pounded. "Adoption?" I looked at him in confusion. "What are you talking about?" He slowly unfolded the papers. His eyes moved across the page. Then he froze. "This says," he whispered, "it says Grandpa legally adopted you when you were 5 years old." The room became completely silent. I felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath me. "I don't understand," I said. "Our mother." Marcus kept reading. "No," his voice cracked. "It says your biological parents died in a car accident." I couldn't breathe. Grandpa had never told me, not once, every birthday, every Christmas, every family dinner. He had loved me exactly the same as if I had been born into the family. Tears filled my eyes. "So, I wasn't born a Carter." Marcus slowly looked up. "No." I sat down on the edge of Grandpa's bed. Every memory rushed through my mind. The bedtime stories, the school plays, the hugs after difficult days. None of it had been fake. If anything, it meant Grandpa had chosen me, chosen to love me, chosen to raise me. Marcus lowered himself into a chair across the room. "I never knew," he admitted. "I thought we shared every family secret." Neither of us noticed Mr. Bennett standing in the doorway until he quietly cleared his throat. "I wondered when you would find those papers," he said. I looked at him through my tears. "You knew?" He nodded gently. "Elijah asked me never to tell anyone unless you discovered them naturally." "Why?" "Because he never wanted you to think love depended on blood." The words settled deep inside my heart. Mr. Bennett stepped farther into the room. "There is still one final meeting tomorrow morning at the bank." Marcus stood. "Is the safety deposit box connected to this?" Mr. Bennett smiled softly. "It is. And now that you've discovered the truth, I believe you're finally ready for what Elijah left inside." That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at the adoption papers beside my bed. Instead of feeling broken, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Grandpa hadn't simply raised me. He had chosen me. And somehow, I knew the final surprise waiting inside that safety deposit box wasn't about money at all. It was about the kind of love that changes a life forever. The next morning, I arrived at First National Bank just before 9. The sky was clear for the first time all week. Warm sunlight stretched across the parking lot, and for a moment, I imagined Grandpa smiling somewhere above us. Marcus arrived a few minutes later. He looked different. The confidence he had carried since Grandpa's funeral was gone. His shoulders were lower, and his eyes held a sadness I had never seen before. Neither of us spoke as we followed Mr. Bennett into the bank's vault. An employee unlocked a heavy steel door and returned a small metal safety deposit box. Mr. Bennett placed it carefully on the table. "This," he said quietly, "is the final part of Elijah Carter's will." He handed me the silver key. My hands trembled as I slid it into the lock. With one gentle turn, the box opened. Inside was no stack of cash. No expensive jewelry. No hidden fortune. There was a worn leather journal, a small envelope, and a single flash drive. Mr. Bennet picked up the flash drive. Your grandfather left one final recording. He connected it to a small television in the meeting room. A few seconds later, Grandpa appeared on the screen once again. This time, he was smiling. "If you're watching this," he said, "then the two of you finished the week together." His eyes filled with pride. "That tells me there is still hope for this family." I looked toward Marcus. He quietly wiped away a tear. Grandpa continued, "Naomi, the day I adopted you was one of the greatest blessings of my life." My heart swelled. "You never came from my blood. You came from my heart." I could no longer hold back my tears. Grandpa smiled gently. "I never told you because I never wanted you to wonder if you truly belonged. You always belonged." He paused before looking toward the camera again. "Marcus." My brother lifted his head. "You spent too many years believing love could be measured by success. I prayed every day that you would remember the little boy who once built birdhouses with me." Marcus covered his face with both hands. "I don't leave this world disappointed in you. I leave believing people can still change." The room was completely silent. Grandpa leaned closer. "Now it's time to tell you about your inheritance." He reached down and held up the leather journal. "Every property I owned. Every dollar I saved. And my repair shop. I have left equally to both of you." Marcus looked up in complete shock. "What?" he whispered. Grandpa smiled. "Not because one of you earned more. Not because one of you deserved less. But because I refused to let money destroy the family I spent my whole life protecting." I felt tears rolling down my cheeks. All week, Marcus had believed he would become the sole owner. Instead, Grandpa had chosen fairness. Then Grandpa held up the journal once more. "Inside this book is my real treasure." After the recording ended, I slowly opened the journal. Every page was filled with Grandpa's handwriting. There were family recipes, letters to both of us, stories about our childhood, photographs we had never seen, even funny memories he wanted our future children to know. Tucked inside the last page was one final handwritten note. "If you're reading this together, then my last wish has already come true." I looked across the table. Marcus was crying quietly. He stood, walked toward me, and stopped only a few feet away. "I'm sorry, Naomi," his voice shook. "I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I forgot what Grandpa spent his whole life trying to teach us." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I stepped forward and hugged my brother. It wasn't because the past no longer hurt. It was because carrying that pain any longer would only dishonor Grandpa's memory. Months later, Marcus sold his luxury sports car and spent weekends helping restore Grandpa's repair shop. Instead of turning it into another business, we transformed it into a free workshop where young people could learn practical skills, just as Grandpa had once taught us. Above the entrance, we placed a simple wooden sign, "The Elijah Carter Workshop." Underneath it were Grandpa's favorite words. "Character is the greatest inheritance anyone can leave behind." Every time I unlock those doors, I think about the little girl Grandpa chose to call his granddaughter. He gave me more than a home. He gave me a name, a family, and a future. And I finally understood what he had tried to teach us all along. Money can be divided. Property can be sold. But genuine love grows stronger every time it is shared. That was my grandfather's greatest gift, and it is the inheritance I will carry for the rest of my life.